Over the years there have been many beat-em-up games in arcades. Some 2D, some 3D, some side-scrolling, some based on TV series or films. Here we take a look back at some of those games. Released in 1991 by Capcom, and is the second entry into the Street Fighter series. This game follows several rules from the first game, and was so popular that today it is one of the top 3 highest grossing video games. There are 8 playable characters in the game, including Ryo and Ken, and up to 2 players can play simultaneously. A 2D beat-em-up from WESTONE released in 1991. In this game, agents Paul and Bobby must put an end to a drug syndicate known as MID, whose hideout is located on Riot Island. They must also rescue Paul's girlfriend, who the gang have kidnapped. The game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up similar to Capcom's Final Fight, with single and multiplayer modes available. This beat-em-up from Taito was released in 1991 and known in Japan as Runok. The game is set in the early 20th century and sees the player controlling a forest ranger who must protect the wildlife from a group of poachers. There are 4 forest rangers to choose from, with a variety of different attacks to perform. The player can also find weapons hidden in barrels and crates. There are 7 stages and a bonus 8th stage, all set in different locations. The game allowed for up to 4 players simultaneously. This game was developed by Sega and released in 1991. The game is a mixture of side-scrolling and platform elements and is divided into 4 acts. You can play as one of 4 heroes: Spiderman, Black Cat, Hawkeye and Submariner, and the game is single player and up to 4 players simultaneously. Released by Data East in 1991, the game features the Marvel Comics characters and is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game with shooting and platform elements. You can choose to play as Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye or Vision, with each character having a different attack. The Red Skull has assembled an army of villains, and it's up to the heroes to stop his evil plans. Up to 4 players can play simultaneously. This game was released by Konami in 1991 and known as Crime Fighters 2 in Japan, and is the sequel to Crime Fighters. The 4 members of the heroes' gang must fight through waves of enemies to rescue Kate, who was kidnapped by the Dead End gang. The game featured single player and 2 to 4 player co-op. Released by SNK in 1991, the plot of the game revolves around a warlord who was defeated by 2 samurais but has sworn to return to the future. The warlord is opposed by 2 protagonists, a cowboy and a ninja. The player has a maximum of 6 health points, and when certain enemies are defeated, powerful spirit forms are available to transform into. The player will need to survive the many enemies they encounter by collecting colourful orbs as power-ups. A classic beat-em-up from Konami released in 1991. Up to 4 players can play as Homer, Bart, Lisa or Marge. Each character has different attacks, such as Marge's swinging her vacuum cleaner. The game was well received, and Screw Attack placed the arcade version as the #1 cartoon-based game of all time. A side-scrolling beat-em-up released by Capcom in 1991. Set in the year 2026, a superhero, Captain Commando, and his 3 companions must protect Earth and all the galaxy from a gang of super-powered criminals. The gameplay is similar to Capcom's Final Fight, and allows up to 2, 3 or 4 players to play simultaneously. The players must get to the end of each stage, there's 9 in total, and avoid enemies and traps along the way. The player can pick up health-restoring food items hidden in barrels, just like you could in Final Fight. Released by Taito in 1991, this game is known for its elaborate anime style and bizarre enemy characters. The game takes place in a land where time is kept flowing with a time key, however a bad man stole the key to stop the flow of time. In the game, you control Zack and Mel, who must fight enemies and a boss at the end of the area, whilst protecting their town. When enemies are hit, they turn into animals like in the 2D Sonic games. The game has single and 2-player co-op modes. Released by SNK in 1991, there are 3 playable characters, each with different levels of strength and special moves. The difference in this game compared to others was the inclusion of mini-stages where the player must defeat enemies in a short period of time to win prizes. Up to 2 players can play simultaneously. Released in 1991 by Data East, and known as Crude in the US. In the game, players control one of 2 mercenaries hired by the US government to stop a terrorist organization known as Big Valley. Players control the Crude Busters by jumping, dodging, and attacking enemies. As the Crude Busters are big, strong men, they can pick up things like cars and use them as weapons. The game featured single-player and multiplayer modes. This game was released by Sega in 1991, a 2D beat-em-up in a similar style to Capcom's Final Fight. You progress through the game, encountering enemies and a boss at the end of each level. Once the boss is beaten, the player moves on to the next level, but if players try to travel through the level without fighting their enemies, the screen will stop scrolling until all current enemies have been defeated. There are single and multiplayer modes available. Released by CP Brain in 1991, the story is similar in style to games such as Double Dragon and Final Fight. The 2 protagonists, Rick and Alan, must stop an evil corporation known as the Legacy Organization who have kidnapped the daughter of a middle-aged man and left him a letter explaining why they have kidnapped her. Each character has different fighting styles, with special items available by defeating enemies and breaking things. The game has single and 2-player co-op modes. Released in 1992 by Sega, a side-scrolling beat-em-up that is similar to other beat-em-ups at the time, as well as Sega's Golden Axe and Streets of Rage games. Princess Lorana has been abducted by Sheikah Sazabis and is using his power to achieve his ambition of conquering the world. You play as one of the 4 warriors who must all go to save the princess and the world. The game is single-player and 4-player co-op modes. Released in 1992 by Capcom, this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that comprises of 9 stages. Each stage contains various enemies, and the game takes place in a realm where an evil overlord is trying to conquer his neighbouring countries, converting them to ruin and despair. The warriors must stand up to the overlord and defend his people and the land. Up to 3 players can play simultaneously. Developed by Midway and released in 1992, the game introduced many key aspects in the Mortal Kombat series, such as the 5-button control scheme and the gory finishing moves. The plot of the game focuses on Liu Kang, a monk who has to save Earth from the evil sorcerer Shang Tsung. In the game, players battle opponents in one-on-one matches, and the player that drains the opponent's health bar first wins the round. Each match is timed, and if both players still have health by the end of the round, the player with the most health wins. Players can choose from one of 7 characters. The game was popular but criticised for its level of violence. A 1992 game released by TATSUMI. In this game, players must choose between Kevin, Gear or Zil, with each character having its own fighting style and special moves. The feature that makes this game different from other beat-em-ups is that when a player is knocked to the ground, an anger power bar appears, requiring the player to rapidly press the punch button to fill it up before it vanishes. When filled, the player's character will be charged and will automatically perform their special move. The game shared some similarities with Final Fight and allowed up to 2 players to play simultaneously. Released in 1992 by Konami, the game is based on the TV series Bucky, Hare and the Toad Wars. The player chooses from one of 4 characters, Bucky, Hare, Jenny, Deadeye, Duck or Blinky, who must stop the Toad Empire from invading extraterrestrial planets and enslaving their people. The game also has platform elements and can be played by up to 4 players simultaneously. Released by SNK in 1992, the game takes place in 2050 where a mad scientist was shut down for conducting bizarre biological experiments. Soon after, his lab exploded and the scientist mysteriously disappeared. Several years later, new buildings have appeared and it's up to 2 young fighters, Ricky and Johnny, to clean up the town before mutants spread across the nation. The game plays across 6 levels containing various mutated enemies and bosses. At the end of the stage, there are single and multiplayer modes available. a side-scrolling beat-em-up released by Atari in 1992. Evil gangs are taking over the city by committing crimes, and it's up to the player to stop them. There are 4 characters to choose from, and the game allowed for 1 to 3 players simultaneously. Released in 1992 by Sega, this is the second game in the Golden Axe series. None of the characters from the first game are playable. This time you choose from Gova the Giant, Stern the Barbarian, Dora the Kenturide, and Little Tricks. Death Adder from the first game is the main enemy once more. The game featured single player and multiplayer for up to 4 players depending on the arcade cabinet available. Developed by Konami and released in 1992, this game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up based on the Marvel characters, the X-Men. The player chooses one of 6 X-Men: Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, or Dazzler, with the objective being to defeat the villain Magneto. They must fight various enemies and fight their way to Island M, where Magneto has kidnapped Professor X and Kitty Pryde. Each character can fight with punches, kicks, and other attacks, as well as each character having a unique mutant power. Players must progress through as far as possible while surviving attacks from Magneto and his minions. The game allowed for up to 6 players to play simultaneously. Released by Konami in 1992, the game is based on the French comic series Asterix and Obelix. The player chooses either Asterix or Obelix as they take on the oppressive Roman Empire. Each character has their own unique attacks, as well as standard punch and kick moves. The game has single player and 2-player co-op modes. Released by Irem in 1992, players choose from one of 3 characters, fighting thugs as well as mole creatures and mutants. Unlike some games, players can't use enemy weapons but can find objects that can be used as weapons. The game is notable for its detailed backgrounds and style. The game featured single player and up to 2 players in multiplayer mode. Released by ALLUMER in 1992, it is a sequel to their 1986 game Gladiator. The story takes place 5 years after Gladiator, with Granolius learning that Gideus has been resurrected and sets out to find out the truth. The player can choose one of 6 of the warriors and must select on a map which region to go to and fight enemies before progressing onto the Golden Castle. The game features single player and multiplayer modes. Released by Sega in 1992, the side-scrolling beat-em-up that is the second game in the Streets of Rage series. The gameplay is similar to the previous game, but introduced 2 new characters, Max Thunder and Eddie Skate Hunter. The game takes place 1 year later, and the game features single player and multiplayer modes. Developed by Taito, released in 1992, this game has 7 stages, each with a powerful guardian awaiting them at the end of each stage. Once each guardian has been defeated, they will drop a jewel, which forms part of the Jewel of 7 Colours. The guardians will also join the player and become a spirit you can summon. The game is set in the mythical world of the Arabian Nights, and players can choose from one of 4 characters: Prince Rashid, Princess Lisa, Sinbad, and Faisal. The game features single player and 4-player co-op. A 3D beat-em-up released by Sega in 1993. The player goes against all 8 characters, followed by a fight with a boss duel. Each fight is a best of 3, and there are 3 ways that players can win: either by knocking out their opponent, forcing them out of the ring, or having more health when the time runs out. The game is the first arcade beat-em-up to use fully 3D polygon graphics, and had single and multiplayer modes. Released in 1993 by Capcom, this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up based on the comic book series Xenosauric Tales. The game was produced as a tie-in to the short-lived Cadillacs and Dinosaurs animated series. The game takes place across 8 stages, with the player battling various enemies and bosses. There are 4 characters to choose from, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Players can choose from Jack, Hannah, Mustafa, and Mess. The dinosaurs are neutral characters that may attack both the players and the enemies. The game has single player and multiplayer mode with up to 3 players being able to take part. Released in 1993 by Midway, Mortal Kombat 2 is the second game in the Mortal Kombat series and improves on its predecessor, most notably introducing more varied fatality finishing moves and several characters such as Kitana and Kung Lao. The game's plot continues from the first game, featuring the next Mortal Kombat tournament. The game also plays similar to the first, but with the addition of crouching punch and turnaround kick moves added. Like the first game, matches are divided into rounds, and the first player to win 2 rounds by depleting their opponent's health bar wins. Also like the first game, Mortal Kombat 2 was well received, but also criticised for its level of violence in the game. The game features single and multiplayer modes. A 1993 side-scrolling beat-em-up developed by Toadplay & Co. Limited. The game is similar to Capcom's Final Fight. The main difference from Final Fight is that the game features scenarios of single or boss-like enemies, as opposed to the usual long series of weaker enemies you need to defeat. The game's plot revolves around a trio of wrestling heroes who oppose the villainous group, known as Mad Bull Group, to save the sport of pro wrestling. The game features single-player and multiplayer mode with up to 2 players. Developed by Data East and released in 1993, this is another game similar to Capcom's Final Fight game. Players move through each level fighting any enemy characters that appear on screen until they reach a boss character. Once the boss is beaten, players move on to the next stage. There are 3 characters to choose from, and the game featured single and multiplayer mode for up to 3 people. Developed by Irem and released in 1993, the game allows up to 4 players simultaneously, with each player choosing one of 4 characters. In the game, players must recover various artifacts that have been stolen from the Basketball Hall of Fame. Each stage takes place in different parts of the United States, with a boss appearing at the end of each stage. Players can perform combos, throws, and dash attacks against enemies, and can find items throughout the game that will restore health. Released by Capcom in 1993, the game stars Marvel Comics' The Punisher, as well as co-stars S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Nick Fury, as they go on a mission to kill the crime lord, the Kingpin, and destroy his organization. Players must defeat enemies and a boss at the end of each stage. Something different in this game is the use of firearms, as well as several gun-wielding enemies that will appear. There's single and co-op modes available, and the game received significant praise upon release and is regarded as one of the best beat-em-ups. Released by Konami in 1993, the game's mechanics are similar to Konami's earlier hit, X-Men. The game revolves around Death Shadow, who has risen from the dead to rule the world once more. You can choose from one of 4 characters who are able to morph into anthropomorphic beasts by collecting a golden statue power-up. The enemies are also anthropomorphic, such as frogs, elephants, and lizards. The game features single and multiplayer modes for between 2 to 4 players. Released in 1993 by Irem, the game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up based on the 1991 film of the same name. Players choose to play as Peter Pan or one of the Lost Boys. There are 6 stages in the game, and the game features single-player and multiplayer mode for up to 4 players. A side-scrolling beat-em-up released by Konami in 1993. The game's plot revolves around World War III having ended in the 1990s, and the people are left to rebuild their civilizations, but there are violent gangs that are trying to stop this reconstruction. Up to 3 players can choose from the 3 main characters who must stop the gangs. Players must guide them through 7 stages set in various locations, such as on a runaway train and in a tavern. The game also had a bonus stage if you beat the game with just 1 credit.